Okay, so Socrates has the bag over his head, and he's about to define love in Socrates' first speech. So when I ask you to present the argument in Socrates' first speech, this is more or less what I'm talking about. Right? Now, the first thing that Socrates wants to claim is that love is some form of desire. Quite clearly, when we speak of love, that's what we mean. It's some sort of desire. But he points out that human beings are ruled by at least two principles, two sorts of desire. The first is a desire for pleasure, right? And the second is a desire for what is best, right? Now, when we ask ourselves what sort of desire love is, right? Well, we can think of this even conversationally in terms of I desire the pleasure of your company. Right? It pleases me to be with you. This is generally what we mean when we are in a romantic relationship, and we're referring to that hooby-gooby schnooby kind of I love you kind of talk. Right? So therefore, right, love is the first kind of desire. It obeys the first principle, the desire for pleasure. Right? And what Socrates wants to point out here, right, and it's on the bottom of your page 17, right by in between 237e and 238a, right? So, sometimes the two are in agreement. Sometimes these two principles are in agreement. The desire for pleasure and the desire for what is best are in agreement. But there are times when they quarrel inside us, and then sometimes one gains control, sometimes the other. Now, when judgment is in control, it leads us by reasoning towards what is best. That sort of self-control is called being in your right mind. But when desire takes command in us and drags us without reasoning towards pleasure, then its command is known as outrageousness, and in fact, I prefer your footnote, note 39, the term hubris. Right? So, love number one is a form of hubris, right? And it really seems that of the two kinds of desire that we have to choose from, love is the first kind, a desire for pleasure, right? That leads us unreasoning towards that which gives us pleasure, right? So, right, if love is a kind of desire, we've got two kinds of desire. What kind of desire is it? It's a desire for pleasure. If love is, in the first case, a desire for pleasure, rather than in the second case, a desire for what is best, love, therefore, is a form of hubris. Right? Now, ultimately, on your page 18, right, what Socrates wants to argue, Plato through Socrates in this case, is for a definition of love. Keep in mind, he's not going to abandon this definition of love, he's going to stick with it. Right? And the definition reads, it's right by 238c on your page 18, love is the unreasoning desire that overpowers a person's considered impulse to do right and is driven to take pleasure in beauty. It's force reinforced by its kindred desires for beauty in human bodies. This desire, all-conquering in its forceful drive, takes its name from the word of force and is called, and I'll write it in red behind me, eros. Eros. Right? So that's what we mean when we say we're in love. Right? When we're in love, right, we are overpowered by our desire for pleasure. Our desire for pleasure takes the form of hubris and overpowers our normal reasoning process. Right? So, right, this kind of erotic love, right, is right off the bat defined as something problematic. Right? So, ultimately, the argument that Socrates is going to make looks something like this. Love, as we just defined it, right, is not the second kind of desire for which is best, right, where judgment and self-control take the lead, but rather it's a desire for pleasure, therefore it's called hubris. Love is a form of hubris. And we can all pretty well see that hubris is bad. Therefore, love is bad. Pretty clear, huh? Well, what we're looking at here is another deductive form of argument, right? If the first two premises, love is hubris and hubris is bad, are true, the conclusion that love is bad must necessarily follow, right? And in your reading of the next few pages, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, all the way up to 24, right, what we find, right, is that the word, and I've got it circled in my book, right, appears quite often throughout the argument, right? Necessary. The necessary consequence. It is necessary for a lover, right? By necessity, etc., 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 right? So this is your cue that this is a deductive argument, and the premises provide not just strong support, just don't show that, like an inductive argument, the premises just show that the conclusion is likely. Whereas what Socrates is offering here is a much stronger argument that provides necessary support for the conclusion. If it's true that love is hubris, and hubris is bad, you can't help but arrive at the conclusion that love is bad. Now, what Socrates does over the next few pages is show how, love is damaging, right, to the intellect of the beloved, to the physique of the beloved, to the possessions of the beloved, and he introduces sort of a problem when desire dies down, right, and a term called back love as well, right? When somebody is so in love with you, it makes you feel so good that you think you are in love with them as well. So really, it's not love that you're experiencing, but rather back love, right? A form of being flattered, right, by the lover, right? You start thinking in terms of them, you start assuming them, right? And in terms of the kinds of arguments that Socrates supplies here, right, in terms of the intellect, right, what Socrates wants to argue is that love of this kind, a desire for pleasure, right, a hubristic desire for pleasure, would try to possess the beloved, right? I don't just want you to like me, I want to be sure you're not going to leave me, right? So, the lover, if the lover is more intelligent, will try to, in a sense, stunt the intellectual development of the beloved, right? Again, with the physique, right? In terms of the physique of the beloved, a lover won't want somebody who can physically best him, right? So, in terms of the physical development of the beloved, right, it will likewise be stunted because this kind of love is about possession, it's about control. In terms of possessions, and we can think about this in terms of, think back to the first time you got a driver's license and got a car, or if you've got money and your beloved doesn't have money, they rely on you, right? They rely on you, right? So they can't leave you if they are, in a sense, dependent upon you, so it's in the best interest of the lover to keep the beloved dependent, so this will be harmful to the possessions, including the friendships, right, of the beloved, right? Now, through all of these arguments, and like I say, I'm going to more or less leave it to you to read through them, right, it becomes clear that the act of falling in love with somebody, like being with somebody who loves you, right, is going to be harmful to the beloved, right? The lover is going to be out of their mind, right, trying to control you. Right? They're going to promise you all sorts of things. Their desire of necessity is going to eventually die down, and then the beloved is going to follow and have to enforce the promises that were made during love. Right? So throughout this argument, right, what Socrates does is, using a deductive form of argument, show that by necessity, falling for somebody and being with somebody who's in love with you is harmful. Alright? So, that's what we're looking at